What is going on, everybody? Happy Thursday. It's BobbyFi with our man Eric Sheets-Haber. We actually have a pretty slow day sports-wise. We don't have a real NBA slate. We do have football coming back tonight, a showdown slate, and we were talking about doing a show on that. I haven't done as much on the football. I usually do the showdowns as the season progresses, and it's usually like the last games, or I'll start playing them on Thursdays, but I'm not a max entry Thursday guy, but we may do a show for that coming up after this. In the meantime, we're going to get into this little baseball slate that I think is going to be hard to differentiate on, but I'm probably going to play one big lineup, and that's about it. Sheets, what are your initial thoughts on this slate?
Yeah, so the first thing is that it's really nasty here in New York. I don't know what Roth has to say about it or whatever, but it rained all morning. It's getting a little bit of a break, but the rain's probably coming back. I mean, this is my non-meteorologist. This is what I'm seeing on the weather, and I'm not a meteorologist, Stacy. That's why I'm saying that. But I'm not the slightest bit interested in trying to play guys in the Yankees, hoping the game squeezes in. That's just my view. And you could make the case that but what if they end up low owned because of it? Yeah, that could be for somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Like, it would be a spot where we would have the Yankees at a chalkier stack. So my prayer is that somehow this game like maybe starts or something. I don't know. It looks so bad. And you're in New York, but I'm looking at the weather stuff. I don't see any way we can even almost. I guess we'll talk about it as the game comes up. But I mean, I don't know. I'm not planning on touching it personally.
Yeah. So like you said, it's the pitching seems, I guess, relatively straightforward, especially without Cole. I mean, even with Cole, but without Cole, it becomes relatively straightforward. There are a couple of things you could do, but like you say sometimes, and maybe just needs a couple of pivots here and there to get it done. I mean, I'm certainly playing. I certainly have some ideas.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, you're stuck there. You got nowhere to go. I'm going to see my daughter, who's also being quarantined, so I have to go visit her from a distance and, that stuff. But also have a date this afternoon, so I'm like, I've got a few things going on. So I'm just going to throw in the one lineup. Anyway, I called up my screen here. I sort of have a way of trying to maybe get a little bit of the differentiating part of stacks and see if I could try and go with the stacks I liked the most. Can you see my build up there, Sheets?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to see this. This is good already.
It's a pretty good lineup, I think, actually, just right off the bat. I mean, you get the double stack with what you want. You get the bottom part, some potentially lower owned of the Tampa Bay stack, and you're giving up some power. But you can play Meadows in the lefty at 4,100. I know he struggled this year, but the guy has got massive power and massive upside. And he's a guy last year who was, more consistently in the 10 fantasy point average than he was the 6.5 that he's averaging this year. So I'll take that shot on him and play this lineup like that. I thought that was kind of an interesting way to go, but we'll go game by game, but just sort of want to get your initial thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, sounds good. I mean, because I was doing something a little bit different with the pitchers. I wasn't getting to Arrieta. Yeah,
Arrieta's it's not that I love him. We'll get into it in the first game. So I would pick Alcantara to be my SP2. The problem is coming off of I guess he's pitched the 2 games back now. Philly, I guess it came down to this. Philly, I guess maybe I should play 2 lineups because Philly basically has just a better lineup than Miami. That's my only argument for this. I think Alcantara is a better pitcher at this point. I think he carries more upside. I think that, he had a good game against this Phillies in his first outing. He's shown some strikeouts upside. I don't know. I'm sort of interested in him, but he can get a little wild, and the patience of Philly kind of worries me a little bit. So I'm just sort of struggling with this decision. But right now I have Arrieta in there.
So it's interesting, So I mean, we could talk about this whole slate in general. So like, if there's no Cole, I mean, obviously the chalk build is going to be Paddock and Gray because you could probably do it. You know what I mean? You could probably get them in.
Sure.
And if you're not going to do that, you take one of them and then you pair it with some other SP2, and you've chosen Arrieta, and you talked about Alcantara. And it's funny, I was going to do something a little bit different. So Arrieta's like playable again, huh?
I mean, well, the thing is, he's always been playable. He got blown up by Atlanta, which, as we know from last night, can happen. He had a bad game in Boston where he just got I think he got a little wild that one. Yeah, he walked 4 guys. Right. And then, look, you look at his line. He pitched a gem against Atlanta. He's coming off a gem against the Mets. And these are scores you don't even need from him today. I mean, I would take a 16, 17 fantasy point score from him and gladly. You have probably the third best matchup in baseball, maybe second best. Actually, if you factor in stadium, it might be the second best or best even in baseball. So I'm into it. I don't see why we should be afraid. I'm curious where I think he's going to be fairly popular, but it's going to be between, I think, like I said, Alcantara is the better pitcher. I may end up going that route. But I still think Arrieta has enough in him to get through a pretty weak Marlins lineup. And if you look at it right here, he hasn't faced a team really this week all season long. So I'm sort of playing that side of it. But
I have a question. Are people going to be going to these guys like Arrieta and the other guy from this game, Alcantara? Are they going to get any ownership or no?
I would imagine they would, but I agree that you called it right away. Like, it's going to be a pretty obvious build for most people.
I mean, like for me, I actually had some interest in the hitting. I mean, a little bit. I mean, not overwhelmingly, but
it should be. Good.
Oh, I was to say I have some interest in the hitting with both these teams. I thought that from the Phillies side, I thought McCutchen was really playable. I thought Hoskins was cheap enough. And then, if you want to go and spend up for Harper, and then these other guys are really cheap, like Halsey, I guess, or I don't know. I kind of had interested in them. And then Miami even. I mean, Matt Joyce is minimum cost. And Dickerson is added. Dickerson, again, is only like $3K. And, I mean, Aguilar is not the greatest player in the world, but whatever. I mean, I kind of, on a short slate, I had interest in little guys from both sides of the hitting here. So I was wondering if people are going to go too much to the Arrieta Alcantara. Because, again, I didn't really look at too much content and ownerships, really.
Yeah, I did my normal research, which basically included, like, very, very little. I'm starting to try and do less and less baseball over the top research because it's hard to get – that herd immunity type thinking is just – it's good to know where people are at, but it's hard not to let it influence you, especially if you've had a few rough baseball slates in a row. And I just think that overall the hitting is fine in this game. And I could see this as being sort of, it shouldn't be contrarian exactly because they're cheap on the Philly side. It's obviously a huge stadium downgrade for them. But I could see it. Like, I don't think I really want to stack them entirely. I would probably lean more towards a Marlins stack because of the prices of the players, or a mini stack of the Marlins. But I don't really love either particular stack. I mean, like, Brian Anderson's too cheap, so you can go to him, obviously. Like you mentioned with Corey Dickerson, he's an awesome play at $3K. But again, if I'm going to be siding a little bit more with the pitchers here and trying to get my bats in the Tampa Bay game, the Dodger game, and then the Padres game would be my three favorite stacks. So I don't mind any of these one-off. I mean, Aguilar's makes a lot of sense at 3,100. There's a lot of good plays that I think just make sense. I don't know that I want to go for the full stack. I do think it's interesting that Real Muto, I'd be curious to see where he ends up in relation to Will Smith tonight, assuming that Will Smith does start. Because I would imagine Will Smith, if he's more popular than Real Muto here, I think that then you can make the argument, they're about the same price, that you just kind of have to play Real Muto. And Real Muto at this price is just kind of ridiculous. We haven't really seen this all year long. Going back to his old Miami, you forget the revenge narrative in baseball for hitters, but it's just kind of funny. He is going back to Miami. Maybe he tries to steal a base. I don't know. But anyway, I do like Real Muto anyway tonight. Just Real Muto and Hoskins make the most sense for me on the Philly side. Didi's fine. Bryce Harper's fine. I mean, they're all fine. I just don't feel like I'm trying to get too much exposure to it. I actually like Alcantara as a pitcher. So that's sort of my issue, is that I think that it looks good for them, but I mean, realistically, like, this guy has been a good pitcher. And I think that he's turned a corner this year, and he dominated the hell out of this team the last time they faced him. But, sure, you can definitely pick some bats.
Okay.
Boston Tampa Bay is interesting. We basically got a bullpen game, which makes it really tricky. So this is what I wanted to get into, because this is sort of the other stack that I'm sort of into, because we know the Red Sox bullpen sucks. You're not going to get very many innings. I mean, what have we got here? 44 and 48 pitches, 2 and 3 innings so far in the 2 games for Kickham. I would be surprised if he went more than 3, which makes everybody on Tampa Bay extremely dangerous, because all the righties very dangerous, because they basically platoon these guys almost entirely. So let's see how the lineup shakes out. What I tried to do was play 2 lefties as a part of it. So that was something that I thought was interesting. The Meadows, Wendell part of it. And look, I don't like Joey Wendell particularly, but he's so cheap and he helps fill out the stack on the infield because there's so many good outfield plays today. So that's sort of the way I was trying to do it. And then going with the catcher, who's probably going to stay in the game no matter what. And then you have the Brosseau, who very possibly could get pinch hit for. But I'm willing to take that shot for a guy who's shown some power upside recently. and they've actually let him stay in the game mostly. You see the ones in there and the twos, but you also see the fives and the fours in terms of the bats. So there is a chance that he at least stays out there. That's the one I feel the least good about. I don't love that he's there. He completes my stack. But I like him individual as a play against Kickham, and if there's another lefty that comes in, I just worry about the pinch hit risk, and hopefully that he gets 3 to 4 at bats at least. And that feels like a lot to spend for a guy you're saying that for, but he might get all 5 and he might hit 2 home runs like he did a couple days ago. So that's sort of my thinking. If you're going to do it, try and do it a little bit different. People are going to play Margot Arizanza, assuming that they're leading off and batting second like they're supposed to. I think you're going to see a lot of interest in Renfroe. These are all guys that are platoonable. So I'm trying to the only guy who I feel like on my team that I picked from this Rays lineup that's platoonable possibly is Brousseau. And again, I just needed the infielders. So that's where I'm at. Let's see how the lineup shakes out. But I think that Tampa Bay, you still want to have exposure to these guys. And I was going to say if Brandon Lau's even in the lineup against lefty, he's the ultimate, probably the lower owned because he's 5,400 and he doesn't have a platoon split. But I remind you, it's a bullpen game. And if you're going to stack this team, you could try and get him into some of those. So that's sort of my way of thinking.
Well, you answer my question with respect to Margot, because he's the type of guy, again, like if you just go with projections and running stuff, people will end up with a lot of him. But as you mentioned on this show many times, Tampa is, because they're a good team. I mean, they do like to pinch hit and screw around or whatever. And especially in a bullpen game like this, if someone like that is going to be really popular, which I guess, technically he should be, right? Because he's a cheap price against bad pitchers, in a good position. But if he's platoonable, that takes away a huge amount of his I don't want to say upside, I guess, but a huge amount of his floor, I suppose, is the best way to describe it. You know what I mean? He sort of has upside if he does bat 4 or 5 times, whatever. So I was going to ask you about him. So you took care of that.
I'd also side with Arizonzo, however you want to say these guys' names. I would side with him a little bit ahead of those guys. I'll take the guy who's just red hot. The problem with him is he's already been, even in these games he's red hot. He got a home run and he was taken out the other night after hitting a home run. That's just the stuff that you got to worry about. So I tried to get a little different and tried to get the guys who I think might be in the game longer. Now they're not going to pitch hit for all 6 of the righties, I don't think. But they won't the catcher, and I don't know. It's just something to be concerned about. You've got Yoshi, Tsutsugo, who they could bring in. You've got Kiermaier, who could come in if he doesn't start the game. So there's just some other bats that they could use here. It's just hard to know what situation will come up and who it's going to be. These guys are still strong plays. I would just mention to people that Margot is fine, but he's only he's hit 1 home run this year. Like even still, you don't need to have him. I would probably go Renfroe and Arizona, whatever, ahead of him, even though he's a better fielder, so maybe he's got less platoon, less pinch hit risk. I don't know. It's tough to figure out, so I'm trying to go with the guys who I think are going to be in the game. And if the lefties who start the game, they're certainly not going to be pulled later in the game, especially because all the righties they have on their lineup are starting the game.
So I had 2 things I wanted to talk about before we left this game. First of all, as we're approaching the NFL, you're going to hear about like flow charts and like streaming and always playing, tight ends against Cleveland or whatever it is, right? So let's talk about our little streaming situation here and just basically playing all pitchers against the Red Sox, right? So Fleming is certainly not going to, strike out like basically anyone, much less like 6 or 7 guys. But at 5,900, you don't need that many points. And if some of these other SB2s like Arrieta and Alcantara are more popular, maybe Fleming might be the way to go. And people will still be kind of probably a little more afraid to play him because of the Red Sox cachet or whatever it is. So I definitely on a short slate had interest in him. And yet on the other side, to be able to play JD Martinez against a lefty is always pretty appealing also. I just want to get your opinion on Fleming. Again, it's a very unsexy SP2, right? And your overall view on that.
Yeah, so this is what I was going to do basically just to show you how. So I like Fleming a little bit. I don't know that you need the extra savings where I would just take the guys in the Miami game. And I think that he actually, people tend to look at the value. He might end up being more owned than the other guys. He's not.
Oh, okay.
This is not like a low owned off the board play.
Okay.
this is the other thing I was considering doing, which I thought was kind of interesting. This was my literally 2v2 and just skip the stack of the other stack. And it was to go JD and Hoskins instead of my other completing the stack, which is it's definitely the more optimal route. But I wanted to go with the Tampa Bay stack because I like them getting to Boston here. But I do think JD is really cheap, and it's just, I know look, we could say he's not the same and all that, and it's true, he's had a terrible year. It just takes a couple swings, man, and it's not like he can't hit a home run still, and against the lefty, this guy's got lifetime, like, unreal numbers, so I'm totally on board with him. Not really interested in the other Boston bats personally. But yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because that was my exact 2v2. And then actually Fleming was the first pitcher I looked at when I realized the pricing I was looking at FanDuel first for some reason today. When I looked at the pricing on Arrieta, I was like, okay, well, I think I would rather just take that shot than play Fleming because there's more upside even in terms of pitch count, and it's really, it's not that much of a difference, the price wise. So that's sort of what I was looking at.
Okay.
All right. So ready to move on to well. All right. So what are we going to say about this? I guess if for some reason the weather completely flips around, the Yankees make for a good stack and Garrett Cole is a good pitcher.
Yeah.
But
if this were sunny, if it was a nice day, I'd probably lose money going 100% Cole. So I'll put it to you that way. He
you play Cole ahead of Gray here.
Was that? You
would play Cole ahead of Gray if if all was normal.
I would.
Oh, okay. I wouldn't play anybody ahead of Gray.
Well, I mean, we're gonna have to talk about the wind because the wind certainly helps Gray's chances here. I would try to play them both if you want to know the truth.
Yeah, I'm really curious what happens with Gray. I mean, he got absolutely lit up last game and was actually fairly popular too that night. So I'm kind of curious where his ownership is going to be. But I love Gray tonight, and I would be trying to get a few Gray Cole lineups in there. So hitting wise, I would have been all over the Yankees would have been right there with the other stacks, which would have narrowed the ownership a little bit, and it would have been kind of fun to sort of maybe to take some pieces or even if you wanted to fade them, at least you would have been a little bit different because I think they are going to be pretty popular here. But I don't know they will anymore. I mean, the thing is, unless we hear, I want them to be suspicious that they might play the game because it's going to help the ownership for the other teams I like on this slate.
Yeah, my favorite Yankee, if in fact that we're playing just for the purpose of shooting the shit, was probably going to be Aaron Hicks at 4K. That's probably everybody would have agreed. Yeah, and it's funny. I don't know. I kind of want them to play because I wasn't going to get to as much of them as maybe some other people were going to. Actually,
I would have been interested in Andahar on FanDuel and here. I would have been interested in Hicks. I would have been interested in Voit. I would have been interested in Sanchez. Actually, pretty much everybody in the lineup. LeMahieu I would have left alone at 5,600, but that's pretty much it. Yeah, I mean, again, I just don't see it as being relevant enough. I'm not going to play it. Actually, what's funny is I'm actually fine either way too. If we think it's going to play, like I'm kind of fine. I'm really fine fading the high ownership, but I don't know, man. It's interesting. Like I just think we mostly just have to treat it like it's a non-game at this point. I really would be shocked if they played.
That's what I'm doing.
Yeah. All right. Cool. All right, let's move over to Cincinnati, Chicago. This is a pitcher's game. Again, I'll remind everybody that even on a short slate, you do not play hitters from this game. I understand that someone got a hold of one, right, for Cincinnati last night. I think Moustakas did. It's going to happen. There's going to be one home run here and there. That's not the optimal way to play. Also, hitting one home run last night wouldn't have gotten you anywhere. You need to just basically get every position to hit two to keep up with those Braves. But, yeah, I actually like both pitchers in this game. I'm not going to get to Alzolay. Alzolay. Sorry, these names are tricky a little bit for me right now. But I certainly understand it, and I wouldn't fault you if you just played both pitchers in this game, to be honest.
Well, I'm glad that I spoke to you because I was going to ask you if this were because it's a short slate, if this were one of those games where you could play maybe a hitter or two, against the Wrigley wind. Just because I was just looking to be a little different. I was thinking of taking a couple of shots with some of these Reds, like you were saying, like maybe like Moustakas or Winker Castellanos or something like that. I guess it's probably not the greatest idea. I do think, by the way, that Gray, given the way it is now, let's start with, FanDuel, he's just going to be my pitcher, for sure. And on DraftKings, I suppose now it's going to be some variation of Gray Paddock or, Gray Fleming or Gray, one of those other guys you mentioned.
Yeah. I just want to point out also that Alcantara has been pretty good. It's only been 69 appearances, 69 at-bats, and I think about 60 of those will be in the lineup tonight. But he's actually been really good in that limited sample size, only giving up one home run, 25%, 26% K rate. I just think it's worth noting that, I'm sort of really heavy for some reason into both these pitchers as my SP2s if I don't go Alzaloy. But, I can't bring myself to take hitters in this game personally.
I got you.
Just not. There are Sheets, you know me. There are very few principles that I think are like you can always do this. This is one of those basically never situations to me.
Okay, very good.
If there's stolen base upside, you could think about it, but I just think we've got other spots.
Don't need it. Fair enough.
All right. Paddock is the obvious SP2. I mentioned the other guys, but he would be the one who I'm guessing is going to be the most popular, seem to make the most sense for cash games.
Well, I have a question for you.
What's that?
Is it possible that Paddock sucks? I don't think he does, right?
He definitely doesn't.
No, what I was going to say is I shouldn't say it that way, right? But remember, like the shorter the slate, the more popular these guys are going to be, right? And while he's fine, but if you could get a couple of good lefties against him, he could run into some trouble, So I would take a look and see if there's San Francisco guys that could be kind of a little bit of a pain in the neck to him. That being, I don't know, that many, right? Yastrzemski, Belt,
Yep.
guys like that.
Yeah.
So I honestly don't think that that Paddock is a lock. You know what I mean? I just don't.
I don't even have him in my lineup.
Oh, there you go. Very good.
I'll play him. I'm going to play him a little bit, but actually, what am I talking about? I'm probably just going to play one lineup tonight. So he's either going to make one or two of my in my little pivot off lineup, or he won't. And I don't think he will right now. But I certainly like him. Like, it's not. I'm trying to be a little bit different. And again, if he for some reason was like 25% owned, I would have 100% just play him. But you're going to have 1,000,000% ownership. He has shown some weaknesses, obviously oddly against bad teams. He's been like a little bit better against some of he was great in Colorado. He had a good game against the Dodgers earlier this year, but then he struggles with Oakland, and then he struggles with Seattle, and he struggled a little bit with Arizona, a little bit with Texas. Actually, he pitched okay against Texas. But anyway, I'm just saying, like, that's the route for trying to fade him. It is still a good matchup. Belt or Yastrzemski are fine, but I don't think I'm going to pay that for Yastrzemski. I think Belt would be the play. Belt's quietly having like a really good season, and it's interesting because I heard this even a couple days ago on a show I'm not going to name. It was right before the weekend, and they were talking about how Brandon Belt just isn't the same, and trying to play him is like a worse version of trying to play Joey Votto. And I don't exactly understand what they're talking about. He was super cheap then. He's still super cheap. The guy's hitting for power. He's hitting for average. He hits tons of doubles. Like, I don't really understand why that they were saying that and why people were talking about that. I actually made me dig deeper into his hard hit and stuff. And people who look at hard hit stuff and things like that are just, I'll just tell you, if you're going to look at hard hit for hitters, you're making a huge mistake, because guys like Bellinger or Trout last year, I think they were both in the 80s for hard hit balls, and they were both the best players in each league last year. These are the MVPs basically. And they basically do that because they weren't striking out. So if you're not striking out, it might not make your hard hit rate look so good because you're going to hit some weak ground balls in there. But I'd rather take the guy who's making contact and still hitting for power.
You like the San Diego bats if you can afford them?
Yeah, I like Moreland. How about that, Sheets? I've come around on Moreland, although he did cost me the other night. But on that great San Diego stack, he was like the only one who wasn't getting there. I had him everywhere. But yeah, Will Myers is the preferred play to me. Not even, I don't know what's going on with him and why. First of all, why is his price here? Second of all, why is he always the lowest one owned? Maybe it's a little biased because he's put up 500 fantasy points the last two games. But you have guys hit 11 home runs. He's one of the league leaders in home runs this year. He's hitting 300. he's the lowest priced and generally the lowest owned of this group. And yet he's the highest producer outside of Machado and Tatis. So I would love to play some of him if I got my stacks. I mean, look, I like these guys. Like this was my second favorite stack. I sort of guessed everyone would go that route, and that they're also kind of expensive, so hard to get in with the Dodgers. But it's absolutely, to me, like the number two or three stack on the slate. I'd rather take potentially the weirder build in Tampa Bay than I would here. And as bad as Cahill is, the question is, how bad is Kickham and the Red Sox bullpen? They're pretty awful. We know that. Cahill's pretty bad too, a lot of the time. But, I could just use the fact that I'll put it this way. He's actually been decent enough at preventing things. It's going to be a little bit more of a bullpen game with a better bullpen. And he's more capable. He doesn't give up much power either. He's giving up 2 home runs this year. So though that's my argument for why you would stack Tampa Bay over San Diego. But clearly I would expect most of the time here San Diego is the better team. It's just they're more expensive and they're harder to fit in and all the other things I said.
Yeah, so I would try to do a 3-man probably if I could with the 3 guys you mentioned actually with Tatis, Moreland, and Myers being the 3 guys. I don't think I would need to get to play Machado. And me, I like to tease just because I can't ever prove this, but I just feel as though he's going to be like 5% less owned at 6K than he would be at 5,900. I don't know why I think that.
Maybe true, but his ownership has gotten so out of control. I don't think it's true anymore for him. I actually think that it's reversed. I think what happens with those things, especially in his case, it's kind of reversed. It's like people actually feel more like the need to play him or something.
Really? Interesting.
And I think that does happen quite a bit because you'll see the second and third highest priced players so often so much lower owned than the highest priced player. And there's literally they can be in better spot. It's just always like that. It sort of seems.
So he's been high owned. I mean, because I haven't been playing him.
Oh, I mean, like as among shortstops, it's been him and the Dodgers have been in good matchups. So Seeger's been popular. I prefer Seeger. Seeger's going to be, in my opinion, just 1,000% lower owned than Tatis is tonight. So I'll take Seeger all day because the lefty-lefty factor. I like the Dodgers better than I like the Padres. That's basically it.
All right, so let's get to that last game then.
Yeah. All right, so this is interesting because it's going to be interesting the lineup they roll out. So the guy you want to play is Kike. I switched it because I'm hoping they play Lux and I can get him at lower ownership as a lefty. Kike is going to be the obvious play, and I'm pretty sure, I'll do a quick look at it as I'm talking, that he's absolutely owned Bumgarner in the past. And I'm not saying that's gospel, but the Dodgers might bat him higher in the order. I know they used to do that with him against against Bumgarner every time. There's a lot of experience here. So I'm going to take a quick look at the Bumgarner BVP. And most of the time Bumgarner pitched against this team, he was a much better pitcher than he is today. So let's see. You got a lot of, you want to hear some BVP for you? 25 for 50, 10 extra base hits, 4 of them home runs. That's ridiculous.
So we're not going to play regression here. We're gonna.
No, I mean I want to play I'm playing. I have Gavin Lux in my lineup because I think Kike is going to be the chalky chalk guy, even if he's batting further down. If I'm wrong, I'm absolutely going to play Kike over Lux. I played Lux specifically because I'm trying to get different with my stacks. So I played Lux and Seeger, and Betts and Pollock were the common ones. But I think that you're going to see everyone play the righties, and I wanted to get some lower exposure. Now, logically, this is obviously the better play. Kike and whoever else, however else you want to do it. But I just am – I like the idea. First of all, I think Lux is going to be I think he's a superstar hitter already. I don't think lefties bother him whatsoever. I don't care where he bats in the lineup. I don't care that he was 0 for 5 last night. He had a monster night the night before. I just think we haven't gotten a chance to see him all year, and I happen to know this kid's awesome. So I like playing him at low ownership. Otherwise you just play Kike. But you want Betts and Pollock to be your staples. They're the guys you want the most exposure to on the Dodgers, in my opinion. And then you want to mix in Bellinger, Muncy, Seager. I actually think Bellinger would be the one I prefer the most. I just sort of like the Seager play, and I thought he'd be a pivot off of a chalky Tatis. Maybe that's a little bit of a better way to do this. And I can change my shortstop if I want to. But anyway, sort of playing around with it. But I really like I like all these guys. And just to mention one quick thing, I don't have any data to back this up, but I'm going to do, when I have time, one of these next quarantine. I want to do a deep dive into narrative based hitting only on the fact that I think there's only one factor that it can really make a difference in. Maybe there's some comfortability or whatever, but I do believe that guys, when they're home, steal more bases. So I'd like to look into that a little bit. It's the same thing. There was an article written a few years ago. There was the 20% stolen base increase from people who were all-stars or potential all-stars the week before the all-star game, the week leading up to the all-star game, or the week leading up to the all-star votes, for both of them. Because and that actually made sense to me as motivation. Maybe you're trying to get that extra thing. You're doing whatever you can out there. You know what I'm saying, Sheets? So that's the only thing I'm just throwing out there as the narrative part of Cody Bellinger playing back home in Arizona. But he always does play incredibly well there for whatever reason.
But does it matter that there's going to be nobody there? I mean, like.
No, it's still being at home. I mean, it's hanging out with your buddies. It's whatever they're allowed to do. I guess you can't hang out with your buddies. I just think that guys tend to play better at their hometowns. Yeah, sure, it is different. I'm not saying that the fans cheering are making him do it or whatever. I think it feels good to go back home as a success when you're in the major leagues. Like I would have that reaction, and maybe I would try and steal next race. I'm just throwing it out there as an interesting way of look, man. The lines are so thin in trying to be better at this stuff that I'll take anything I can get. So I want to look into that kind of stuff.
Are you interested in playing either Dustin May or Arizona bats against him?
No. I like Dustin May a ton. I don't know why, as a real pitcher, I don't know why he doesn't strike more people out, and I just don't understand it. He feels like he should. He's probably too expensive. They've been bad this year against everyone. Well, not bad, but I just don't want him. I'd rather play the guys around him to answer. I'd rather play Paddock, Gray, even Alzaloy. That's where I'm at.
Do you like any of the Arizona, the cheap bats, like Calhoun, Peralta, Varsho, Rojas, guys like that?
They're all fine if you want to squeeze it. If you need to squeeze somebody in, but I don't prioritize them.
Okay.
He's a good pitcher, but I think they're fine. Like, I mean, look, if you want to, we mentioned some other values out there. Like, I wouldn't say any of those guys are better values than like Corey Dickerson is. Maybe you could argue for Peralta versus Corey Dickerson here. It's close probably, but like Dickerson has a little more pop. He can steal bases, so I would go that way.
Okay. And I always forget to ask about the Arizona game. So we're playing that the roof is going to be open, you think?
I think it's going to be open. It's been open the last 2 days, which again is just absolutely bizarre. I just came back from Arizona. It's 125 degrees. But if it's going to be open, obviously a little bit more of a bump to the bats, although it hasn't made as much of a difference this year as it has in the past.
That's interesting.
They did the humidifier thing started last year because they were hitting. It was like getting ridiculous. There was more home runs being hit there than Colorado, basically.
So if you were going to prioritize again, so I could just see your lineup. So you're showing me where you're prioritizing the Dodgers, but you'd have to believe that Pollock is probably the best play.
Yeah, I mean Pollock and Kike, depending on where Kike is batting.
Okay, and then again,
Chris Taylor, fine.
Yeah. What about Muncy, lefty?
I get the feeling the Dodgers are going to rest somebody today, just as an excuse. So they'll probably use the lefty as an excuse to rest somebody. So one of those guys probably does get rested. My guess would be that it wouldn't be Bellinger. The problem is then you get to Corey Seeger, who's having a legitimate run at the MVP right now. Like, he's got a really good shot.
Now let me ask you this. You mentioned when what's his name? When Kershaw was pitching the other day, that since the Dodgers are basically not locked in, but they're pretty well guaranteed a playoff spot, that you think that there's a chance they might let Kershaw roll a little bit to try to win the Cy Young or something like that?
I was saying the opposite the day before about Walker Buehler, that I would doubt that they let Walker Buehler pitch very long, and he pitched 2 innings.
Right, but you were saying that was possible to let.
Yeah, but these are different. You have to know it the right way. So yet the narrative yesterday would have gone the exact opposite direction. So Kershaw, because of where they're at, not that they would let him go longer, but that they would just let him pitch his normal amount of pitches, that he wouldn't be pulled early. That was all I was saying.
Right. No, but what I was going to say is that if they thought, right, because you were saying, I wonder if what's his name would be a dick and take him out of the game to whatever it is, if he had a chance for Cy Young or something like that. So I was saying, only because you mentioned it with Corey Seager maybe making a run for MVP, is it less likely that it gets pulled late in the game? But he's not the type to get pulled anyway, right?
Yeah. So it doesn't really come in as much for that. It's more about whether he's starting, which we don't really need to speculate on. I'm just saying I would bet that maybe Muncy would be the guy. I don't know. I don't know who they would sit, but if I were them, I certainly would let Corey Seager get a shot for the MVP. I mean, Tatis is probably going to get it, but Corey Seager is not that far behind him. I mean,
Right.
these are pretty similar seasons overall. And although I mean, Tatis probably does have it, but anyway, whatever. Right? Whoever is in the Dodger lefties are all fine. You can play all of them. These are my preferred Dodgers. I actually would put Seager in that category too, assuming he's in. I just like Bellinger a little bit better, and it's hard to get both. But I like both of them a ton. So
yeah, it's very interesting to see the way you build these, and just to even see just that when you showed me just that 1v1 with the earlier with the I forget what it was, when you swap one pitcher out for the other and how it made it all different. I mean, I hope people really appreciate this, because I don't think and I wasn't going to say this, but I mean, I don't know how much other content even shows anything remotely this much. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, they're actually seeing you build like lineup builds and just showing you actually doing it. And it's like so invaluable at being a good term. You know, it's so valuable to see you, for everybody to watch you do this, that really going to have to start charging people soon. Sorry.
No, I think it is really valuable. And we've gotten some incredible feedback lately just about that kind of stuff. So, all right, man, with that said, you ready to get out of here?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, guys. Hey, good luck to everyone out there. For everyone, I'm for Sheets. I'm Bobby saying we'll see you at the top of the leaderboards. Later, guys.